Coming up on Primetime News, President Park Geun-hye asks officials to come up with ways to grow together with a China that's transforming to expand moderately based on consumer spending. This as the IMF cuts this year's growth outlook for Korea, heavily dependent on exports to China. Samsung's third quarter earnings beat market expectations, rising nearly 80% from a year earlier to roughly $6.3 billion. And the President's Cup kickoff here in Korea. It's the first time the international gathering of golf players takes place in an Asian country. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello and welcome to Primetime News on this Wednesday, October 7th. I'm Hwang Ji-hye.
And I'm Daniel Choy. Thank you for joining us.
President Park Geun-hye has met with members of her Economic Affairs Advisory Committee.
And she stressed that maintaining confidence is key for Korea to take another leap forward. Hwang Ji-hye starts us off.
President Park said that with the confidence it showed during its economic development, Korea can turn the current crisis into an opportunity. Speaking to her economic advisors on Wednesday, the president recalled the Semaul movement, an initiative that led the modernization of Korea's rural economy in the 1970s, noting that it has since become a policy that contributes to international prosperity. The OECD and the UNDP recently decided to benchmark the Korean initiative for developing nations. President Park also noted China's efforts for building a consumption-driven economy. This greatly affects Korea, as China accounts for a quarter of its exports. Despite the changes, the Korean leader said China still offers diverse opportunities, adding that Seoul should not only bolster efforts to stay ahead of its neighbor, but also find ways to grow together. Referring to the 17 creative economy innovation centers across the country, the president called for the need to provide all-out support for fresh ideas proposed by each center, adding that unjustified regulations must be lifted. The centers offer workspace funding and advice to startups and are part of the government's drive to ease economic reliance on conglomerates. President Park said that through such regulatory reform, Korea could produce another development model like the Semaul movement to help contribute to the improvement of other countries. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
And the president's call for new growth engines to shore up the export-driven economy comes as the IMF cuts the country's growth outlook for this year. Again, the concern behind the downgrade is China's economic transition. Kwon So-ah has this report.
It's the third cut in the space of a year. The IMF has lowered Korea's growth outlook for 2015 to 2.7%, down 0.4 percentage points from a forecast in May and July. Next year's growth was slashed by 0.3 percentage points. Both cuts are bigger than the IMF's forecast for global economic growth, which was cut by 0.2 percentage points for this year and the next.
Korea's growth forecast looks bleak as exports are continuously posting negative growth and domestic consumption remains low.
Economic woes in Korea, but also across the world, are being fueled by slow growth in the world's second biggest economy, China. IMF's chief economist says China's economy is going through a transformation. He added China is focusing more on domestic consumption and services than on exports and investment, which will help growth in the long term. But
in the near term, there are implications for China's growth and for its trading relationships with foreign countries.
Korea, shipping around a quarter of its exports to China, is no exception.
Concerns in Korea are especially big, as compared to other emerging countries and the entire world. There are not that many reliant on exports, as much as Korea.
Experts say, considering bleak domestic economic indicators from September and October, it'll be difficult to reach the government's 3.1% and the Bank of Korea's 2.8% projections, meaning there is a chance of yet another downward revision later this year. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
In the tech realm, Samsung Electronics announces better than expected earnings for the third quarter, nearly 80% growth from the same period last year. The stronger performance was mainly driven by the improved chips and display sectors. Shin Seong looks into the numbers.
Korea's top tech giant Samsung Electronics came out with improved third quarter operating profits, satisfying deflated market expectations. According to its preliminary earnings forecast Wednesday, Samsung posted an operating income of $6.2 billion, up nearly 80% compared to the same period last year. It's also an on-quarter increase of 5.8%. Sales also rose by more than 5%, reaching $43 billion from 3 months earlier. The chips and display businesses led the growth.
Solid gain in the nanometer technology has helped drive up the business, along with an increased revenue from the displays to Chinese smartphone makers, boosting the company's bottom line.
The chip business is likely to have earned at least $3 billion in operating income in the third quarter from $2.9 in the second quarter. But despite the mobile market saturation and dampening global demand for new handset models, Korea's smartphone giant is likely to have put out better performance in the third quarter with the early launch of flagship models like the Galaxy Note 5 and the Galaxy S6 Edge. Samsung's new lineup of its mobile devices was launched in August in an attempt to get a jump on Apple ahead of its latest iPhone releases. Despite the spike seen in the third quarter, it is unclear whether the growth will persist through the coming quarter, with looming global economic uncertainties added with the full-fledged battle with its major rival, Apple, and its iPhones. Shin Seong, Arirang News.
Ending years of talks, 12 countries agreed on the Trans-Pacific Partnership earlier this week. The TPP is being dubbed the largest free trade pact of this generation, covering 40% of the global economy.
And to help us dig into the significance and impact of this milestone pact, we have Professor Shin Seong from Seungmyeong Women's University joining us. Thank you for making time for us, Professor.
Always my honor.
So the trade pact still needs approval from the parliaments of each of the countries, but nevertheless, negotiations are completed. So how would this deal affect the global economy?
Well, there have been some mega country trade pact before, like European Union and also RCEP. But in terms of the GDP, it is almost 40%, contrary to the TPP. EU is about 20%, and the RCEP is a little more than 27%. So almost double the size of European Union. So we could dub the TPP as the greatest, trade pact in the world. So definitely it's going to have a significant effect on world trade. In terms of size of trade, TPP is a little smaller than EU or RCEP, but the difference is less than $1 trillion. So if trade between TPP countries increases rapidly, I think sooner or later TPP is also the biggest trading bloc in the world.
Well, for now, China is relaxed, although the RCEP is 27-40 in terms of percentage. China, of course, any trade pact will welcome China. China cautiously welcomed the accomplishments, and it seems like it's not going to join the TPP. Are there any remotely microscopic chances of China considering joining the TPP?
Well, TPP is driven by United States and Japan, two leading global advanced countries, and they require international very high standard in trade and investment. So if China wants to be the member of TPP, then they have to accept international standard, which is going to be very challenging to Chinese economy. So I think for the time being, China will be content with the RCEP, and as economic stature improves along the line, I think maybe in the longer run, China will be thinking about the joining the TPP, but at the foreseeable future, I think there's a very little chance for China actually being a member of TPP.
Well, Korea was initially pretty adamant about not joining the TPP, and now we're having second thoughts. How big of a factor is Japan, and why the change of heart for Korea?
Well, first, I think Korea already had 10 free trade agreements, individual bilateral trade agreements, and so they thought that 12 countries comprising TPP. Actually, we already have many of countries bilateral trade. So first, the Korean government might have thought that TPP is not necessary. Second, more important point, I think, is Japan was not quite active until mid 2013. So Japan not in the TPP, I think there isn't any reason for Korea to be actively involved in TPP discussions. So I think the prime reason for Korea not being active in participating in TPP was, I think, Japan. And now Japan being an active founding member of TPP, I think there are some in the political arena, they are quite active, asking for Korea to be the member of TPP.
But as you mentioned, we already have 10 bilateral trade deals of the 12 participating countries. Should Korea still join the trade pact? And if it really does, how would it affect the domestic economy?
Well, we have to understand that, by Japan being a member of TPP, okay, we had to lose competitiveness in already existing 10 countries that we maintained our free trade. So that we can't change. So from the start, we are losing foot ground to the Japanese competitors in 10 already existing FTA member for that. That is so. The current question for Korean government and trading companies is that we have to join TPP to gain markets in Mexico, which is not a bilateral FTA, and gain the markets access to the Japan. That is the positive side. And the negative side, being a member of TPP, is we have to open our market to Japan. So we have to weigh the gains of being a member of TPP, which is the market access to Mexico and Japan, and on that we have to count the loss of our opening our market to Japan. And I think the net gain effect, I think, is not that significant. So at this point, being hurried to join the TPP is not quite beneficial. The other thing that we have to consider is we are beginning to lose our competitiveness in the existing markets. So how to keep competitiveness when Japan being the active member of TPP? I think that is a more important question that we have to look upon.
All right, we would really have to gauge the pros and cons of the TPP once we decide to, since we're not a participating country.
Right, we already enjoy the benefits of free trade with those existing 10 bilateral trade negotiations. Now Japan is challenging that, so I think we have been maintaining the benefit, but now we are losing some footing ground on the Japanese. That is the significance of TPP for Korean trade.
All right. Thank you so much for your time today, Professor.
You're welcome.
The 2015 President's Cup kicked off today in the city of Incheon here in Korea, and it was a tense day for the United States and the international team at the Nicholas Golf Club Korea. The reason, the announcement of pairings for the 5 foursome matches that begin on Thursday. Team US yielded the first pairing selection to the international team, where Adam Scott and Hideki Matsuyama were chosen as the first tandem. The first U.S. team of Bubba Watson and J.B. Holmes will be competing against the duo. 4 additional pairings were decided, but with the total matches reduced to 34 candidates will sit out the first 2 days of competition. This is the first time the President's Cup is held in Asia, and the winner will be announced on October 11th. The Ethics Committee for the World Football governing body is seeking suspension for Chung Mong-jun, the ex-vice president of FIFA, who's now running for the presidency of the organization. Chung, on his part, says this is a scheme to sabotage his bid altogether. Hwang Ji-hye has this story.
On Tuesday, former FIFA Vice President Chung Mong-jun held a press conference in Seoul to read out 9 pages of accusations against him submitted by FIFA's Ethics Committee. The charges against him stem from a letter he sent to FIFA executives in 2010. In the letter, Chung proposed to raise millions of dollars for a global football fund, which would support Korea's football development in its bid for the 2022 World Cup. The committee is now investigating Mr. Chung, calling his proposal a clear violation of FIFA's code of conduct. Meanwhile, Chung says he had already been investigated and cleared 5 years ago, and that the committee has a different agenda.
People refer to FIFA's Ethics Committee as Sepp Blatter's hitman. They only attack those who challenge Mr. Blatter.
Chung said the Ethics Committee is trying to ban him from all football-related activities for 19 years. If the suspension does take place, it would also prevent Chung from registering as a candidate for the next FIFA presidency, which closes on October 26. Chung is now asking the international community for support.
I still believe in the healthy conscience of the international community. It's ridiculous for FIFA to ask for another hearing on a case that closed 5 years ago.
Chung plans to speak out on FIFA's corruption again at an upcoming football event in London. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
After 13 years and 11 failed attempts, the Korean government is finally going ahead with a tobacco policy that requires cigarette packs to carry graphic health warning images. Oh Se-young shares with us some of the latest in Korea's efforts to curb smoking.
Starting from December next year, the Korean government will require all cigarette makers to label packs and boxes with graphic health warning images. The Health Ministry said Wednesday that specific regulations have been set in the revised National Health Promotion Act, which was enacted in May this year. Under the new law, graphic warning labels must cover at least 30% of the main front and back surfaces. Combined with text warnings, the label should take up no less than 50% of the pack's design. With this policy, Korea will follow the provisions of the World Health Organization's Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, which requires member nations to cover at least 30% of the main surfaces with strong and graphic warnings. In the last decade, almost 70 parties of the convention adopted pictorial warning policies, each with varying standards on the size of the labels. Among them, Thailand requires the highest percentage of warning label coverage at 85% on both front and back surfaces. Australia comes second with a quota of 75% for the front and 90% for the back. In Korea, the labelling regulations will be applied on all types of tobacco-related products, including e-cigarettes, pipes, cigars, chewing and smokeless tobacco, each with their own relevant warnings according to their respective health risks. Oh Se-young, Arirang News.
In other news, in Korea, autumn is regarded as the season for reading. That's why, as the seasons turn, various book fairs are opening. Among them is an international book fair in Seoul. Kim Ji-yeon takes us there.
Korea is well known for exporting its cultural content, including K-pop music and TV dramas. But how about its books? Answering this question is the focus of the 21st Annual Seoul International Book Fair, which opened on Wednesday.
The fair enables readers, writers, and publishers from all over the world to come together in appreciation of all kinds of books, including illustrated children's books.
Such children's books are seen as most likely to hit overseas bookshelves. The Hen Who Dreamed She Could Fly by Hwang Ji-hye is a case in point. Since its release in Korea, it has sold more than 1.6 million copies over the past 13 years. It was made into an animated movie in 2011 and also translated into an English version. Within a month of its release, the English version became the best-selling illustrated book in major bookstores in Britain.
Although all the main characters of the book are animals, readers tend to easily relate to the story as if it's of a friend or parent. When readers start to do that, it doesn't really matter whether the story is from another country. It becomes universal.
The event is sponsored by the Culture Ministry, which hopes to provide support for the country's publishing and book industries.
It goes without saying that books are the foundation for creativity, which serves as an important competitive drive in today's society. This is why the government is vowing to support the development of the publishing industry, so that it can play a vital role in cultural development.
18 countries are also on display at the fair, which runs through Sunday. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
And now for international news headlines, Bruce Harrison joins us at the News Center.
Today's focus, Volkswagen announces a timeline for recalling millions of cars affected by the emissions scandal. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe plays it safe in a cabinet reshuffle, and more Nobel Prize winners.
All right, Bruce, let's start with we heard that essentially is that if you've got a faulty Volkswagen in your driveway, you can expect its emission standards to be up to code by the end of next year.
Well, Ji-hye, what we know now, the head of Volkswagen told a German newspaper that if all goes according to plan, the company would begin a recall in January for cars affected by its diesel emissions scandal. Chief Executive Matthias Müller also said he hopes the fix would be complete by the end of 2016. Now, at least in the U.S., the Environmental Protection Agency would first have to approve the fix offered by the automaker. Volkswagen spokesperson was unable to elaborate on a timeline for EPA approval, though. The number of cars to be recalled around the world could be upwards of 10 million. Despite all this, Mueller remains optimistic Volkswagen will bounce back and learn from this bitter experience. He said the crisis gives the company an opportunity to overhaul its structures, but re-earning the trust of customers won't be easy. In Korea, the head of the local Volkswagen branch has called the scandal a great betrayal to Korean Volkswagen drivers. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is keeping his political friends close as he rearranges his cabinet. The cautious move comes as he shifts his focus back to the economy. Ari Suan reports.
Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is set to reshuffle at least half of his cabinet. In a press briefing on Wednesday, Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga announced a third new Abe cabinet list. Of the 18 cabinet seats, Prime Minister Abe is keeping his close allies in what's considered the 9 backbone positions of his administration. Finance Minister Taro Aso, Foreign Minister Fumio Kishida, Defense Minister Nakatani Gen, and the Chief Secretary himself are among the 9 to keep their portfolios. Some new faces are expected, as the briefing revealed that the former Deputy Chief Cabinet Secretary Katsunobu Kato will head a newly formed ministerial post for tackling demographic issues such as the country's falling birth rate and growing elderly population. Abe will also appoint Moto Hayashi, who used to chair a steering committee of the ruling Liberal Democratic Party's lower house, as a new Minister of Economy, Trade and Industry. The partial reshuffle is seen as an attempt to shift focus away from the controversial security legislation enacted last month amid fierce opposition and put the economy and diplomacy at the front line of his cabinet. Abe is also said to have considered his flagging support rate in preparation of a lower house election scheduled for next year's July. Lee Soo-in, Arirang News.
The recipients of the latest Nobel Prize in Chemistry have made important discoveries that could be used in the development of new cancer treatments.
The Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences has decided to award the 2015 Nobel Prize in Chemistry jointly to Thomas Lindahl, Paul Modrich, and Aziz Sanyar for mechanistic studies of DNA repair.
According to the Academy, our DNA is damaged every day by a number of things, such as the sun and cigarette smoke. The scientists who won the award discovered how cells repair and protect that genetic information. The Nobel Awards were founded in 1901 in accordance with the will of business tycoon Alfred Nobel, and today the categories include chemistry, literature, peace, physics, physiology, or medicine. The laureates' findings could also help shed light on hereditary diseases and aging. And that's a glimpse of the world today. Have a great night.
Cloudy skies covered most of the nation throughout the afternoon, and they will continue overnight and until tomorrow, while the northern parts of Gyeonggi-do and Gangwon-do provinces will see sporadic showers with thunder and lightning. And with clouds over the peninsula, temperatures will be a few degrees lower than today, and readings to drop dramatically starting Hangul Day on Friday, and we have rain in the forecast on Saturday. So take that into consideration if you're planning to be outside during the long holiday weekend. And as for tomorrow's reading, Seoul will start at 15, getting up to 24, while Busan also reaches 24, while Daegu and Gwangju sees highs of 26 and 25. And as for the other regions, Daejeon and Jeju Island will see a high of 25 and 22, while Dokdo rises to 20. As autumn deepens, we'll see breezier and chillier mornings and afternoons in the days to come. That's all for the weather. Good night.
And that brings us to the end of our newscast. As always, thank you for staying with us.
We will be back same time tomorrow. Goodbye for now.